thank you for joining us at Mystic U. We're here today with Miss Sylvie Steinbach, and she's going to be informing us on Karmic Astrology. And we're all very excited to learn more about this fascinating field and how it can benefit all of us. Before we jump right in, I'd like to introduce our very special guest, Miss Sylvie, and to tell you a little bit more about her. Sylvie is an established celebrity intuitive. Private practice primarily here in Los Angeles, where she's been for at least the last 15 years. And her clients come from all different walks of life, different backgrounds. They are entertainers, they are entrepreneurs, they are mothers, and she's been able to help them all find a sense of clarity and make better decisions. And they're also international clients. She takes calls from everywhere from Australia to Asia to you name it. In 2007, Sylvie released the first English manual on the Lennar Mont Oracle, and it was called Secrets of the Lennar Mont Oracle. And we must say congratulations. This book was an Amazon bestseller. It's highly educational and informative, and we're blessed to have this woman as an expert right here with us.
Thank you.
Using her famous Lenormand cards, mixed with tarot, Sylvie's readings are uncanny, down to earth. They're insightful and practical. The sessions give you clear information and spiritual knowledge, and most impressively, her predictions are meant to be verified within weeks, months, and this is the story of her clientele. Week after week, emails and phone calls. I can't believe it, it's just as you said. So, without further ado, let's get to know more about Miss Sylvie Steinbach.
Hello,
Hi.
I'm very happy to be here today.
Yes.
So, we want to know more about Karmic Astrology.
Yes, it sounds fascinating, and I don't think most people fully grasp what that means. They've heard of karma, they've heard of astrology. What is this science? What is this art? You're going to get into that, but first tell us, how is it that you came to be right here on this point on your spiritual path? What led you to Karmic Astrology and the other gifts and talents that you have?
Well, I was born psychic. I already had the gift. I was born in a family that was known for that already. But you know, like any beginning, you have to learn. And so when you learn, you try different techniques, different methods, different tools. And along that journey, besides the Lenormand cards, I got trained in astrology officially, but there was a Christian school at the time where they still had an astrology school that you could attend. And while I was training with them for 2 years, I discovered I had a talent by looking at the natal chart. And I could actually see what you consider is your past life or your previous lives, why you were coming here, and what kind of life you were planning to have in order to fulfill your life's intention. And I started to test this particular discovery, and I found out that I was able to predict certain events in my family that I didn't have any knowledge of.
Wow.
And so I went on to do a radio show for 1.5 years, 2 years, and we were doing guests that we didn't know anything about, just by using their birthday, and draft the natal chart, and we had some remarkable results. And the story is that when you start to have that kind of accuracy, people are asking to have those sessions done. It's just that it's not an understood principle, because most astrologers do, in general, what you call traditional astrology or Western traditional, and they don't really go too much into past life as being the only foundation of their particular session. In my case, I don't do any kind of psychological reading. I don't do prediction per se, although there is predictions in it, because you actually unveil the life of the person. So that is actually a reading that you only do one time. You don't come back to update it, like in normal astrology when you come every year for your solar return, or you come every time you have a question about a particular event. This is covering what you had designed before incarnation, the reason why you choose that life to begin with.
What I'm hearing is that it sounds like astrology, but in a more holistic sense.
Yes.
There's one has a focus that's right here, and what I'm understanding is we're bringing in these elements of, you know, the past life and how that plays into now, and then that makes sense in how, in pairing those two, you can then be revealed some of that prediction element.
Yes, you go with the principle that before incarnation you were offered several lives that will have helped you experience a particular type of lessons or a particular type of experiences. So you chose that life based on the outline that was shown to you. And you had a goal as a soul, you were evolving, you were trying to explore certain avenues. So the natal chart, when it is accurate, will unveil that design. It will unveil the reason why you picked up that life and what you were planning to do with it. And once you have opened that box, you literally can see what kind of career, what kind of personal life, what kind of situation this person would be confronted with, or how they will be successful. And sometimes people have not completely fulfilled what was available. Because guess what? When you come back, you have free will. And you forget. You forget that you had a design. And this combination of amnesia and free will sometimes lead to confusion, and helping people to remember what they were here for, their intention, allow them to use those information to their best benefit. So for example, if there is a particular way to know how successful you could be in a specific type of career because of the talent and skills you have brought back from previous lives that you have explored, you could then tweak your present situation to go after that particular career.
That could be, I can see how that could be incredibly insightful. And what actually came up for me as you were saying that is that how it can provide people with a sense of confidence.
Correct.
Which, when you're confused, most definitely is lacking. So a lot of people are familiar with concepts of karma. They're familiar with concepts of astrology. And I'm really beginning to appreciate how this brings them both together. Again, in that holistic sense, because they're not separate.
No, and karma in this particular case is not to be perceived as a negative word.
Right.
Karma in this case is your knowledge, experience, whatever gift you have developed in your previous life that is on record on this natal chart, because it may not be the last one you just did. It's the one that you have extracted all the knowledge and information from as you were putting them in the luggage before you were taking your trip. And you basically decided to pick the content of your luggage in order to be prepared to enjoy your vacation, so to speak. So karma in this case, it is your knowledge, skills, sometimes your phobia, sometimes some of your fears and all things, but it has to be taken as a whole, not as a negative or completely positive. It's a mixed bag sometimes, sometimes it's not. And why did you decide to come back? Because you don't have to come back, really, for a while. So there has to be a reason why you decided you wanted to go and jump in the pool again. So once you understand where you were coming from, where you're going, then the life you decided to pick start to make sense. It's like a puzzle. All the parts start to come together. And what is amazing about this kind of reading is that when you read for somebody who is 65, 70, 75, and my oldest client was 86 years old, their lives are not anymore ahead of them. They already went through the program. So actually for them, most of them, most time during the reading, they laugh. And they laugh because they get nervous. Because it's so right on the money, they just don't know how you're doing it.
Right.
And so afterward, when you ask them
it's like you're telling them their secret.
That's correct.
And
when they give you the feedback afterward, they tell you, well, that's exactly what happened. When I was 25, this is what I did. When I was 40, this is how many marriages I did. And this is what happened with my child. And so, to me, that's how I know how accurate it is. Because not only I've been doing that for 35 years, and I have them recorded. When we were doing the radio show 25 years ago, it was recorded. We had that principle of doing recording because we wanted people to be able to go back to the recording 20 years later. It's a lifetime reading. You're not going to remember 10 years from now what I said, so it's good to be able to go back to your tape, correct, at the time. And so today I really insist, I will not do this reading unless you are recording it, because of those information come to pass 10, 20, 30 years later. And I always have those older people telling me how amazed they are. Now, don't get me wrong, sometimes I have 30 years old that most of whatever is to be revealed, they already know about it. But it's still a more predictive tool for them because they have not gone through their life yet completely. What is amazing is those people on their 60s, 70s, and 80s. To me, that's where I have the most interesting feedback.
And even then, it's got to bring a sense of affirmation. Because I can only imagine being, you know, in that point in the game, and, you know, you're reviewing all of these highlights, and if there's even a seed of doubt left, that's not what you want in your last few moments.
Correct.
So to have that affirmation of, you know, I was walking the right path, like I feel fulfilled, I feel completed in my purpose here in this time.
The realization that actually you had mapped this life in its great outlines, that you actually did choose the main events or the main aspect in your lives. And what I found interesting is, even when I read somebody who is 28 or 30, I always say to people, we don't have proof of what I am preaching, let's face it. But your gut feeling is your best compass. If whatever I'm saying about your past life when I start the reading doesn't ring a bell to you, something really feels extremely wrong, let me know right away. And the reason could be that the time of birth was inaccurate. And that's the case, we're not going to have an accurate reading. So we don't need to pursue, and we don't need to go through a traumatic event doing a reading like that. But it's very fascinating, because I had a case of a lady who had 2 birth time. One was actually the real one, and she said she never, she stopped using it because every time she was doing an astrological reading, she couldn't recognize herself into what was said about her. And most of the event that was predicted did not happen. So she went to a shaman, and the shaman reset the time, supposedly, allegedly based on certain event that took place in her lives, correct? So the hours of difference was 3 hours. And I said to her, I said, listen, I can't, I will have to start with your official date of birth. I'm going to do the chart with a 3-hour difference, and let's do a pact. Let's start with your real time of birth. We're going to start with your past life. If there is anything in that story that feels wrong to you here, right there in your guts, tell me, I will let it go, and I will go and move on to your reset chart. We went through 3 hours nonstop.
Wow, with the original time of birth.
That's right.
The other thing that I thought of that's really wonderful about this is more and more people are becoming familiar with past lives, more and more people are becoming open to the idea, and more people are becoming curious about what is this experience that informs so much of who I am. It's a very, very valid question.
Correct.
Yeah, it absolutely leaves an imprint. So here comes this tool that works in the same way that the Western astrology natal chart works, and it's so insightful, and it sort of takes a little bit of that, how do I figure this out? You know, I mean, let's face it, past life, if you're not necessarily in the conversation or in a place where that is available to you, it comes with a sense of mystery of how do I figure that out? Who do I go to? It seems kind of nebulous and vague. And here is a tool and a system that works in a way that we're used to. We're familiar with the natal chart, you know, and we're familiar with the way that astrology plays out. And now it's informing us on this past life experience. So it's exciting that this is now available for people who are curious and just thought before, past life? Where do we even begin?
Because traditionally, the way to access your past life, there are not that many options. You can do a past life regression with a qualified hypnotherapist.
Right, and it has to be someone very...
And not everybody can go under.
Right.
You have people who are resistant to hypnosis. They don't go into an altered state of mind very easily. They're not suggestible. I had a client of mine who tried to do another protocol of past life regression, and it did not really work very well for her. You have not a lot of means. You can go to see a professional, let's say, that can read past life, but again, it's kind of limited. So this is definitely an alternate solution for people who are interested in exploring what kind of past life may have an effect on their life to your decision to take this new lifetime. However, it doesn't mean that there is no exception where there could be more than one lifetime shown here, because we tend to explore repetitive situation until we get the master of it. So sometime you will have very similar things that we have already been exploring in different variation, and it's all packaged together.
Right.
So sometime it will show up saying that this is the man past life on record, but you have done some other things in similar ways. And what I find fascinating is that I have done readings for people who are very religious. So depending on what religion you belong to, you don't believe in past life.
Right.
Okay? And I, really introduce the idea that this is just an information exchange. They don't have to believe. If they feel uncomfortable, again, if this is not sitting right for them, and their gut feeling is telling them this is not comfortable, they don't recognize themselves in it, there's some kind of problem, to speak out, and I will stop it right there. And what I have experienced with those individuals is that they find it fascinating. There is something about the information that rings a bell.
Right.
So even though they don't believe in past life per se, or the afterlife, they do find that the information that is being exchanged during the lifetime protocol of looking at your career, your relationships, your health, and all this kind of good stuff just makes sense.
And there's something to be said about information that strikes a chord with you.
Okay.
And honoring that intuition, whether it's a feeling you get from someone who you're like, where do I know you from? Inexplicable, strong connection. Or if someone tells you something about what they perceive in you, or what the information is perceiving in your circumstance, that feeling, that resonance is worth investigating. It comes up for a reason.
To me, I think a karmic astrology session is an experience. First of all, it's minimum 90 minutes. It can go easily for 2 hours. And you are going for a journey in a different time and space. Because I've had readings that go for 3 hours and people did not realize they were sitting there for 3 hours. It's like time change. And so when you are in that time capsule, what happened is I give information that has no meaning to me, because it's not my reading, it's not my chart I'm looking at. But what I don't realize, because there is no question answer in this kind of reading, it's all me talking for an hour and a half, or 2 hours, is that when we finally go through the feedback phase, people are saying, it's uncanny, you say this and not my nickname. Or you told me exactly the profession I'm in, and I'm not in a regular, easy to guess profession. You were able to tell me about certain things that happened in my life that not a lot of people know. So when you get those kind of feedback, it gets a little bit spooky.
Yeah. And like you said, you're not talking about yourself for an hour and a half.
I'm not making the projection.
This is just you reading the information.
Right.
And since you don't have an ulterior motive, a bias in this circumstance in any way, the feedback is affirming the process. So this is not even like an egoic, like, Sylvie, your prediction rate is incredible, and your celebrity clientele and your fan base around the world is yes. But nonetheless, this is saying volumes about this process, this craft. I don't know what you would call it, but this modality.
It's a modality,
Yeah.
and sometimes people get spooked.
Yeah.
They get spooked to a point where they just don't understand how you can lay down this kind of information. How is it possible? And the concept and the idea that this could be pre-planned is scary also.
Yeah.
Because people want to believe there is no way there is a grand design, but there is. And what I also find fascinating for me to do them is that it taps into a very higher level of consciousness. You go into an altered state in some strange ways where you channel some information, obviously, and those information are uplifting because they are coming from a very positive, very insightful source. And I have had great pleasure sometime to unveil information to certain people, knowing that this was a life-changing event for them, and that they will change their life dramatically as a result. And I have had people quit drugs, who changed their career and finally led the life they wanted to live. I had people who felt that this was the biggest therapy they went through and helped them kind of finally pass over a certain hump they were into. So this is not a psychic reading for entertainment purposes.
Right.
Okay? This is not playing cards and telling you who you're going to meet tomorrow. This is for the truth seekers or for the person who is really interested in finding out what was their grand design. And we're not using Vedic astrology, we're not using anything exotic here. We're sticking to our Western astrology for the sake to have an accurate time of birth, because that's very important. And from that basic natal chart, you do not have to be present in that reading. I could do that chart without you in the room. Okay? You get all that content in that time. It's remarkable.
So I'm hearing that this kind of reading is for everyone.
Yes.
This is I laugh in this moment because so many people always make the joke, oh, there's no operating manual to life. Life doesn't come with instructions. And yes, that's absolutely true. But at the same time, here's an opportunity to gain this worldly outlook, this perspective from truly a higher place, which in a sense is almost, it's not going to be your day-to-day manual, but it's like, hello, here's an opportunity to potentially get some kind of a roadmap.
Yes.
And to get your bearings. And like you said, whether you're someone that is that real soul seeker that is trying to come to a feeling place of that great question, or if you're in a crossroads in your life, this is the kind of information that will help to orient you, is what I'm feeling.
Let's talk about the kind of people who ask for this kind of readings.
Yes.
You have the person, any person, could be you and I, who decide to have an experience. So that's one of the clients I will do. And then you have the mother who has 2 children and is interested to see what kind of children or souls she has been given birth to. So it could also be someone who is in a relationship and maybe is experiencing issues with that and wants to know, what am I? What I should know about relationship, because relationship is complicated and it can sometimes people are fit to be in a relationship. Sometimes it's not the grand design to be in a relationship. So it's good to sometimes kind of look at it as from that side, from that point of view. What I think is important to know is you can make it a tool for parenting, to understand better your children. You can make it a tool for understanding better your significant other, as long as you're willing to do that for yourself as well, because it takes 2 to tango here. And it's also a tool for the person who is maybe seeking to know better about themselves, or the person who is seeking to improve some of their lives aspects, and they're not sure if there are certain things that they should know, they feel maybe is not completely revealed to them. So sometimes this can be a very good tool. What it doesn't do, and I also want to talk about that, what it doesn't do is it won't tell you who is the next person you're going to marry. What it won't do is when you're supposed to do your next big deal. It is not a tool for those kind of questions. Then you can come to me for psychic readings, and I can absolutely handle those questions for you. I do not combine a karmic astrology session with a psychic session. You have to book separate in different days, because this is a completely different kind of protocol, and I don't mess up with those energies.
So let's get into what happens when someone comes to sit with you for Karmic Astrology. What does that entail? What do I need? How should I be prepared?
Okay, so first you need to have your date of birth.
Okay.
Most people know when they are born, except that sometimes you have people who are adopted, and depending on circumstances, they do not know. Unfortunately, I can't help those people, so that will be an exception here. You need your time of birth. Time of birth as exact as you know it. Now, if you said to me, I'm born between 6 and 6:30, it's not exact. Okay, so you have to look at your birth certificate. You have to ask your mother or anybody who was maybe your aunties or grandpa to tell you what it is, but it needs to be exact. So if it's either between 6:15 and 6:20, no big deal, I can work with that. But if it's going to be 6:15 to maybe 6:45 or 6:30, I need to look at the two times. I see too many differences between the two charts. I may not do it. And then you need your location. So if you're born in another country and it was a small village somewhere in Thailand, try to give me the name of the village and try to give me the nearest city that you will be close to, and then I will try to work with that. So it's basically give me as much details as you know how. And then you can call or make an appointment online, and then you will have to book for an astrological session. And we have the option to give you 90 minutes, but we will block 2 hours in order to make sure that we complete this. Because we can't start and stop halfway.
Right.
It's just, it will make you very unhappy if we do. So we need to be able to complete that. Once we are all set and you come in, we'll sit down. You will have your favorite smartphone to record that session, and you will bring your tape and recorder. Bring a lot of tapes, please. And we will start by looking at your past life on record. So I will tell you who I feel you were and what was going on and what has been your journey in that life. And then once we have established those two frames, we'll be looking at your life design, what your soul decided to do within the parameters that were shown before incarnation. So we'll go over your professional or career, your financial situation. We'll go over your personal life, your family life. If there is kids showing, or if there's something about children we need to talk about, we'll talk about that. We'll look at what you were supposed to do in order to fulfill your obligations in taking that life. And then we'll go over health. We'll go over any kind of gift and talent you may have, anything that you need to know about certain aspect of the future. And then we'll look at your pain and suffering, things that you have to accept to take with you that you can't automatically work with. It's just to accept that it's part of you. And then we'll look at some prediction, because this chart get activated at a certain particular period. So I will look to see if there is anything significant about certain years you need to know, at least 5 or 10 years ahead. I won't go 20, 30 because I'm going to lose you in the process, but I will say 5 or 10 years ahead, I will look to see if there is any activation, and we'll talk about that. Believe it or not, this is right there already, 90 minutes usually.
Yeah. Well, that's a lot of content.
It's a lot.
You touched on almost every facet of someone's life.
That's correct.
And I especially can appreciate that part of this reading is about the gifts and talents that we're here to express. It's my feeling that a lot of people struggle with that. They sometimes are at odds with, to use the word you just used, activating something, that potentially is dormant within them that could bring them a lot of joy or a sense of purpose. And I can see how folks after this session can make drastic change in their life, because if it's resonating as a truth, then you would want to align yourself with that and make those choices and take action.
Well, in your life, there are layers of manifestation. It's like working on a project, correct? You supposedly to start with the foundation, and then you create layers and you build walls, and then before you put a roof, correct? So there is a certain logic in building a life that is being shown here in the natal chart. And you can have people who have multiple careers, and that will show here. Sometimes the multiple type of jobs you had to do may seem or appear to be a random act of nothingness, when actually it was not random, and it was meant to be the path to prepare you for the ultimate career you were supposed to fall into. Some careers are meant to happen even if you had no prior education and no help whatsoever. You have people in charts that shows that they're going to be very successful in a literature career, and they may have never got a bachelor degree in English. You have people who marry into money when they come from nothing and they just had a regular job. If this is the kind of life you're going to have, this will be shown in your chart.
So fascinating. So let's take a brief sort of interlude.
Yes.
And we're going to touch on an example of
Yes.
what can be discovered in the Karmic Astrology chart. And I gave Sylvie my information.
We
And it's
wanted
about
a
to get-
volunteer.
Yes, I was the guinea pig, and it's about to get really revealing. We're not going to do the full session, obviously. That would be really in-depth. And I would just lose focus and be hanging on Sylvie's every last word. So we're going to use this as a little hors d'oeuvre, a little sample.
Yes, and again, what I'm going to do is just as applicable to Riyaana. It's not automatically the same thing that is going to happen for your chart. Some charts, some past lives are extremely precise in details, and some are more vague. If you were a peasant somewhere in the 1600 and you were the best cook in town, it may be not as rich. And if you were a major landlord and you had built a castle and you had 6,000 lives you could have decided upon, and that will be a different kind of information in there. So in your case, when we look at your past life, they show that you had a life of service, which means that having to deal with other people and thinking about other people was really the key here. And you were, fortunately for you, you were a man in this particular life.
I do well as a woman. That's
Yeah, and you reach a certain age because they show you as reaching an older, more advanced age, which was a little bit unusual at the time. And they show that you had to travel by necessity. So you may have experienced a certain event that forced you to leave your native country to go elsewhere because of natural disasters or things that were not predictable at the time. And you may have been part of a more massive exodus of people due to such kind of event. Now, I don't know if it's automatically natural disaster, it could be sometime wars, but definitely something triggered a movement.
of a lot of people, it sounds like.
It seems to me that there were other people with you. But what is interesting is you have risen to become like, you know, the elderly guy that people go to for leadership and wisdom. A little bit like, oh, he's a very important man. He's part of our elders in the clan, correct? That was a little bit of that kind of status that was reached at some point. So obviously it means on a purely point of view of the ego, you have been able to move up the ladder socially because of your own intelligence and your own life experience, and because you survived that entire process that you went through. There's also the idea of being ready for the unexpected and understanding that you can't control your elements. So you may be, for others, a permanent reference point in a very changeable environment that could have been put ups and down. And to a point where whatever you represent, you may have been very symbolic at some point that represented maybe an old culture that was no longer accessible, or maybe your entire civilization went down and you were the last, one of the last one who could talk about it as you had seen it, and not just as it was a legend.
Like
correct?
a living relic or something.
You could say, well, I will not call you a relic, but because of the age,
Yes.
and because, you know, you were very honored or very respected, you could say, yes, I prefer the word ancient, in not in a physical way, but in that's sometimes the way they were calling people like this of a certain age. I could see you with a beard, you know, white beard. Very different than you are today. But this is basically what they show your life was. And what were you really doing in first of all, in your climb, in rising to a much more powerful position, is all this time you were here to try to share your wisdom, your experience, and try to help others figure out things, and maybe you had some healing abilities in the process. Maybe you were the pseudo doctors or healer when people needed because of what you had learned along your journey. So it makes you someone who knows what it feels like to be powerful. And you know how it feels like when you have responsibility and you are the leader of your own clan. Okay, so all that has been explored, and I will say successfully, because even probably when you passed, people still remembered your name. So there were a long-lasting legacy here in terms of doing your role right and playing it the way that you were supposed to play it.
So when we spoke earlier about when you start to read the information, if it doesn't feel right in the gut to say something,
That's right.
well, so much of what you are communicating, it's coming and it's being received so easily. There's no real resistance to what you're saying, even when you say you can see me with a beard. I'm still not resisting that. I got a little facial hair, but that's okay. Much of what you're saying is being received with so much ease, and I can say that because I'm consciously trying to be aware of how this feels in my body as I'm receiving the information, and there's no resistance. And there's parts of me that it's almost like there's this internal feeling nod.
Okay.
And it's stoking my curiosity, yes, of course, as it would with anyone, when you hear this new story for the first time. But more than that, there is already a feeling of affirmation when you say things like service and caring for others and being able to interpret my personal life experience in a way that benefits others. Those are things that I can feel are in line with much of who I am at the core. So, right now I just want to turn this way
to go
for
back,
another hour and a half.
No, to go back, but this is important because what does it mean you bringing as gift and talent in this lifetime?
Right.
That's not just only about talking about a past life. It's about understanding, therefore, why is it the past life on record? Why not another one? I'm sure you have lived many.
Right.
So why this one? Because you're taking that notion of leadership and be able to go through the events that you don't have control over as part of an experience. And you also take with you the understanding that changes can happen anytime. So you're taking that. So that makes you what? That makes you be able to have an ego, but it's put in terms of service. So it's not the greedy ego. That's not the lesson here. What you have learned is the idea of I have an ego because I need to lead. I need to lead because I want to help others. And in that previous life, I was put under those kind of circumstances to take leadership. I may have not initially wanted to.
Right.
But now I'm bringing what I have learned from that experience into something that's going to help me in this lifetime. So I'm bringing my understanding of leadership. I'm bringing my understanding of what people may need. I'm here to help others, and I'm here to understand I cannot control my environment. Because I've known what my environment can do.
Right.
It can disappear tomorrow. I've been moved from one place to another, so I've understood and learned that and accepted that. So that means that if we look at why you're coming back, what's your life purpose, which can sometimes take many lives to complete, is that you decided to come back to be a leader by working through a protocol of knowledge until you recognize as somebody who knows what you're talking about.
And I think when you started to explain the significance of why this life, if we've lived so many lives, why this one? Why is this one informing my experience? By choice, why this one?
Correct.
And I think that comes back to what you were saying earlier, getting that insight on the gifts, on the talents, because you had the lifetime to develop
That's
that
correct.
gift and that talent, and then it makes complete sense to take that and choose to come back and apply it. Even if it takes, like you said, more than one lifetime, but you have the experience, you have the gift, and now it's the application. And as anyone who's made that shift from out of alignment to something that is more in alignment with their gift, with their talent, and why they are here, those are the most significant moves, because they bring so much peace, and then things start to flow in your life. So I just wanted to reiterate that the past life that is prominently featured is a huge key in understanding your gift and your talent and your purpose for choosing to be here now.
And sometimes it helps you understand certain phobias. You know, I have people who have had chronic nightmares since they were little, and they're not little anymore. They are in their 30s, 40s. They went to therapy, couldn't figure it out, what the purpose, the reason why, and then we look into the past life and we got the explanation. And once they understand it is actually a residue of a previous life memories, it's much easier to figure out what protocol to apply to try to either eliminate or tone down the effect of that particular trauma. There is a lot of application you can have if something come up in the past life that has become a problem in this current life. Sometimes just knowledge of it solve half of the problem, but sometimes it may require specific protocol. So I do sometimes work with certain other specialties, people, like I have very good hypnotherapists who can sometimes help people to eliminate certain situations. So it is a field of research in some ways, because you can really understand why people may have a desire to collect knives. I had a client of mine who had a past life as a warrior, and he loved his swords and he loved his things, and I said to my client, I said, that will make you probably have a certain attraction for any weapon that is basically that kind of thing, knife, other swords or whatever. And he was laughing. He said, I have an entire collection in my office.
I want to real quick just touch on something that you said earlier about the protocol that you can take after you receive this kind of information. And it just dawned on me that for people who are perhaps struggling with a sense of not understanding an aspect of who they are, that can bring tremendous grief. Not being at peace with an aspect of who you are, your behavior, your personality, and not being able to fully understand it. I mean, jokingly, when you said phobias, I thought of spiders. But aside from that, you know, you mentioned earlier addictions, and there are certain thoughts or behaviors that people struggle with. And it's not that there is no effort on their part to overcome or to understand. It's that perhaps the methods that they've been using to overcome, or the methods to understand, they're not providing that sense of, this is what this is not my doing, I am trying. And it allows for a sense of self-acceptance and peace and self-love, which is invaluable if you've tried other things in your life to understand an aspect of who you are, or if you're struggling with an aspect of who you are, and it's making you not feel good about yourself. I would definitely recommend this.
It's a very valuable tool to sometimes settle what is unsettled. Because not everybody is having issues because they have an addicted brain, for example. You have a lot of people who are spiritually depressed. Spiritual depression comes from the fact that their soul doesn't understand what it's here to do. There's a complete disassociation between the body and the physical functioning of the body and the soul. And for some reason that never reconciled over a certain period of time. When you're born, you have past life memories often. The problem, by the time you get scolarized, all that goes by the window. And it can be a traumatic thing for a lot of people. There's a lot of things that they repress as a result. You have people who have memories that are still not repressed, that are still active, and that can be extremely disruptive for them to lead a normal life. And it's very important that those problems get acknowledged by somebody. I have more and more therapists who are looking into that. I have more and more students in medicine who are looking into that. We are body, mind, and soul.
Right.
And sometimes our problems are not just physical or just mental. And the soul has the right to have issues. If the vehicle that it's using is not working, functioning properly.
Right.
So this kind of therapeutic application can make a tremendous difference in somebody's life when they realize that nothing is an accident here, everything was said, and they can actually rectify. They can make the conscious decision to make some changes so that they are finally flowing easily along with what was meant to be.
Beautiful. I think that's so perfect for where we are right now. We've had traditional physicians, we've had medicine, we've, as much as we can, come to a place where we're actively working on healing our physical body, and then recently taking with compassion our mental health.
That's correct.
And there's more and more initiative towards greater mental health and compassion with people that suffer with mental health issues. And it's becoming part of a more open and common conversation. And I feel like this is the next step, is yes, why not rectify issues with the soul? If we can work on the body, if we can work on the mind, let's put the soul to ease as well.
Yeah,
and here's a tool.
The flow of energy should be without any blocks or any kind of obstacles. And the problem is the soul doesn't feel in tune because of some residual issues, that it is coming from a previous life memory, that it is coming from an early trauma in childhood, and it is coming from a series of trauma that happened when you were an adult. If this has happened before in other lives, it is amplified, because we are not just born completely from scratch, and then when we die, all that is scratched as well. Mm-hmm. There is a certain consistent memory, there's a consistent pattern of a certain direction and progress that needs to be acknowledged. So when you die, you just don't, nothing goes with you. It's still, the knowledge of what you have experienced will still remain in some way, shape, and form. So when you do mediumship, for example, people, even though they don't have a body anymore, they still sometimes act as they were, because they project what they were at the time. And so this is part of what we don't understand at this point, is that we are not just a blank canvas when we come in and then somebody wipes us clean by the time we're gone. There is nothing in our reality that actually back up that claim.
Right.
We have too many people, children that remember previous life with names and address and profession and how many
specifics
kids.
That are
specific
scary.
things that are very, and have been documented and confirmed.
Right.
And we have too many people who had near-death experience where technically they are dead flat for 20 minutes, they are being brought back, and they can tell you what was going on in the room in details. Mm-hmm. That going with the theory that we don't have a soul, or that the soul doesn't have a memory all by itself,
right,
that is not depending on the body, is ridiculous. And this kind of reading actually back up the claim that we do continue.
Yes. So everyone should get their Karmic Astrology. You only need it once.
Only once.
You only get the session once. That's all you need. But it's so vital because you can't ignore the soul, and you can't ignore what the soul needs to express, or the current lesson that it's trying to learn. Otherwise, you wind up spiritually depressed, as you were saying.
And there are a certain number of people who are spiritually depressed.
And I imagine it may not be hard to figure that out. If you've checked off your mentally, we're good to go, and the body is good, but what else is, something is not clicking, and something doesn't feel right in the gut.
Okay.
There's a very third and important area that we need to check in on.
This could be an interesting reading just for that. So it's not just for a person,
right,
or it's not just for a parent looking to improve their understanding of their kids. It's not only about two people wanting to understand who they are in a relationship. This is also having therapeutic application because it can really zoom into whatever problems spiritually are there. And to a point where it may still require from you to take some action, but at least you will know why things have happened the way they happened, and why you feel the way you feel. And sometimes it's so liberating for the client. It just feels like a big weight has been taken off their shoulder because now they understand why they are where they're at.
Yeah, wonderful. So I think that gives us a great overview and understanding of karmic astrology, who can benefit from it, basically everyone, how it can be applied to your life, what you need in order to have this session, and when you're ready. Sylvie is here at Mystic Journey Bookstore. She's here in Los Angeles, but she's also available to you wherever you are around the globe.
Yes.
So you can call, you can visit the website, and book your appointment, either in person, via Skype, on the phone. This education, this insight is here, and it's available to you if you reach out. Sylvie, is there anything that you would like to share before we wrap this up?
The only thing I will say to add to this is that once you understand your life path, it's amazing how you can use a different tool, and the tool will collaborate and reinforms the entire information that was revealed. I do that often at the end of the Karmic Astrology. I will use my own system in numerology, and sometimes we just have to giggle about the answer because it's like literally the same summary, a snapshot of what was talked about for 2 hours. So what I'm trying to say is when the information is accurate and correct, it doesn't matter what kind of tool you use, you will always come back to the same point. And that's what is amazing about this kind of reading.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
I've learned so much about karmic astrology and my former Yoda self.
You can call yourself that way, yes.
And you're going to learn so much more about your life, your experience, and who you are, and hopefully it'll bring you a tremendous sense of peace. And Mystic Journey Bookstore is here with spiritual guide